Good morning and welcome to episode 2 of Coaches and Coffee. Good morning to my two co-hosts.
Good morning. Hey, my wife asked me why it's Coaches and Coffee, and I think the listeners have to understand that we're doing this at supposed to be doing this at 5:45 in the morning, but sometimes the Wizards connection up there in Canada doesn't work as well. So if you were listening last week and he fell off the face of the earth for a couple seconds here, it's his hamster isn't keeping his internet running. So anyway, good morning. And my wife also suggested that it should be two big dick heads and a nice current coach is what the name should be.
That could work.
So the Coaches and Coffee part is we're all drinking our coffee this morning. By the way, I've got mine from a local roaster up here. It's called Vermont Mud. That's for real. It's fantastic. But go ahead.
Okay. So today's episode, we're going to talk about two things, really, and then we're going to do a new segment starting this week where we're going to have a debate at the end of the podcast. But today's topics are winning cultures and team culture. And so we'll start out by asking, what are some of the factors that we feel go into winning cultures? And the first thing that I would highlight or state would be usually winning programs have standards or principles that are non-negotiables that coaches get across to their players, and that truly makes the expectations what they are, and kids either thrive in that type of a culture or they try to buck the system, but it's just being consistent. You guys have any specifics?
I agree with the standards. I mean, it shouldn't take long to develop that process of teaching the kids the game and that aspect of it. But, as far as the winning side of it, it all starts. I know that you had the feeder program side of it, but it starts in the younger ages, and you talk about shoot, pass, and dribble. Just teach your kids to shoot, pass, and dribble. And then you start with the things of introducing, as they get older, the more intricate sides of the game. I was very fortunate because I had an assistant who was basically a savant when it came to drills and was always looking to develop something new. But in regards to the programs itself, again, I know I said it last time we spoke. It starts with administration first, and then trickles down. And again, I was very fortunate to have a very strong athletic director. So I think that's where it begins. And then down through your coaches and the coaches that you have that are in the feeder programs have to buy into what the message that you are sending at the higher level.
I think winning is easy. I don't think winning championships is easy, but I think winning is easy if you just practice what the Wizard just said. If you just do everything right to make the players better, not necessarily about winning, but I think the more you work to make your players better, the more you're going to win. And that really just starts, as the Wizard said, with team concepts and drills and making the players pass, shoot, dribble. And I think he forgot, but I remember watching his teams play defense. And, once you get those inscripted into the kids, it's just easy to win.
Yeah, another thing that I have in my elaborate notes is, preparation and, how some coaches, will allow their teams to, dribble into trap zones, 42 times in a quarter and not make changes. And, some coaches probably don't scout other schools and put in game plans. I think, the consistent programs, usually have a game plan, in place. And, kids are still going to make mistakes, regardless of the plan that you put in place. But if you have a shared responsibility, the kids buy in, take responsibility for their mistakes. The coaches take responsibility for their mistakes, and continue to learn from that. Then, I believe, as the Wizard was saying about fundamentals, if you're going to win 90% of your games today on fundamentals alone. If you can pass, dribble, shoot, and I guess play some defense occasionally, as the professor said, you're going to be successful in high school sports.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, you talk about the winning being easy, and the thing that you got to teach the kids, I think it's okay to fail as long as you learn from it. That was the biggest thing, is the fear of making a mistake caused kids to shut down sometimes. And just don't play with fear. Just go out there and play the game.
Yeah, I think about your teams back in the day, Wizard. You're trapping all over the court and you're giving up layups. They make these mistakes, and then the next time down the court, they're still gnawing on your leg as you're trying to make that same pass, and they've adjusted. And and the same thing with your teams, Mags. They make their mistake and they just move on, and that's just this team culture that you build in a practice. And I think as coaches, especially today, we're gonna constantly come back on this old coaching versus new coaching. We're talking, one of the people in this chat group is a Marine. This idea of you can go out and you can do things, but you always have your teammates back. And I've watched both of your teams play, and they make this mistake, and there's 4 other kids to pick up and help from where that mistake occurred. And when you do that, you win. If we're all lucky, we win 90%, but most of us are going to win at least 75 or 80% of our games by just instilling this team concept.
Right.
Yeah, maybe I, shot for the stars with the 90%. It was kind of like last week. We thought we were going to have four listeners of the podcast, and thank you to the 33 people that downloaded this mediocrity after week 1, and we hope to make it better as we go.
It's not going to happen, but go ahead.
Well, again, we can shoot for the stars. What was that, Wizard? Sorry.
We ain't going to sound any smarter as we go further. So,
yeah, if you're listening still at 8 minutes and 50 seconds into this podcast, don't expect it to get better. Just a warning.
Listen, you guys have got to become more optimistic in your old age instead of pessimistic, but we will move on. So we've already kind of started to talk about winning a championship, or how easy winning is. And, personally, I'll start by saying I think it's just the opposite. Like, winning a championship today, and it doesn't matter, it's at the high school level, or the college level. I think that, it's hard. A lot of things have to go your way. Sometimes a little luck, doesn't hurt. But I think there's, with certain programs, certain teams, there's so much parity in particularly college sports today, although NIL is starting to change that. But, teams strive to be consistent. But sports are imperfect at times, and you don't have to be better than a team for a series like in the NBA or the WNBA. You just got to be better than that team for 32 minutes or 40 minutes on a given night, and that's all it takes. So you have one bad night, and as they say, you win or go home in the playoffs, and sometimes that's the greatest and worst thing about playoff games. And there's some agony, but there's also some jubilation at times when you pull that off. So how easy is it to win a championship?
Well, coming from myself, who was basically 0-4 until we finally won one.
Hey.
I
Who
can
did,
tell you it's not that easy.
which team did you beat, Wizard? Which team did you beat?
It was a team coached by a very astute fellow who is probably one of the smartest people that I know. So
Yeah, thanks.
we got lucky. But anyways, you fight against so many things through the season. You fight against academics and grades. You always want your kids to do well in school. You fight against the illnesses that run rampant through schools, from flu bugs to common cold to, just about anything. And injuries, you're fighting against that. And again, you play that long season of 18 games. We call it long. It's not really that long, and it seems to blow by. But you play that season of 18 games, and it's basically just a seeding tournament, because the real season starts when the playoffs begin. And it really doesn't matter. Yeah, you want to be home. You don't want to be traveling from here to Hinsdale your first game, but you go where you need to go. And once you start that season, any given day, one team can beat another. And, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't.
At our little D4 level in New Hampshire, where, as my dad used to say, winning basketball in New Hampshire is like winning cross country skiing in Alabama. It just doesn't matter. But it does matter. Like, it does matter to these kids. It does matter to us coaches. And the hardest part about winning a championship is you go through the season and you can win your 80% of the games because you're playing against teams that don't have winning programs. But when you get to the semifinals, which we've all done way too many times, you're coaching against coaches that know what they're doing. You're coaching against coaches that have all of the same stuff we're talking about. So when you get there, I mean, even when you've got the best team, you're coaching against people that know what they're doing. And it's really hard. I mean, I'm talking to two coaches that I've lost to in those situations. It's really hard to win those games.
Yeah, and I think that it's easy sometimes. I hear over and over from those coaches in the stands, and that the kids choked and this or that, and most of the time those assistant coaches in the stands probably never were in that situation themselves or never played a sport, and I think we sometimes forget as adults these are adolescent kids that are hopefully playing a game that they truly care about, they truly love. And you know what? They're human. I joke year after year, if we have a team that shoots 40%, we're going to be a pretty good team. And that means that we missed 60% to achieve 40, but that's how imperfect the game of basketball can be. Is you can have the greatest games. I've been a member in a championship game. We shot like 72% in the first half against a team that was loaded, to say the least. And we had an 11-point lead at halftime because of how unconscious we were in the first half. And then the second half was a little different. But I think the next segue would be like into winning, and when does winning become important or matter for that? And as varsity coaches, obviously we're ranked on our winning percentage, our record, whatever. So at the varsity level, I think it's important. And I would just say, at the JV middle school level, we believe that everybody has an opportunity to play. And then if you have an opportunity to win the game at the end, you take it for the experience. And then at the elementary level, everyone should play, and the focus should be on fundamentals, not how many games are won or lost. Agree, disagree?
Oh, absolutely. But I think it's important. One of the things that I always told my kids was that I'm preparing you for life. Part of the game is winning and losing and being successful or failing at the things in between that cause you to win or lose. And I said, I'm not preparing you for the WNBA. If that's why you're here, then unfortunately, you probably want to find another sport. But, get you ready so that when you graduate, you go on to your next job or you go on to school, you are ready to go and compete because life is competitive. So if you want to be successful at basketball, that's great. And I'm here to help with that. But the main goal is to get you ready to be successful as a person in your community.
Yeah, I think the parents that don't like us are going to disagree with our job is to make these kids better people. And they're going to say that we don't do that. But that's not necessarily because we don't do that. It's because they don't agree with the way that we're doing that. And I think the Wizards' point about, I'm going to answer this. Mags's question was, is winning important? It absolutely is not important. And if you can keep that in mind, and what your goal is to make your kid better, then you'll win. So the winning isn't important at any level, in my opinion, but you will win because of making the kid better. And I think the one thing that when you talk to the kids that we've coached 20, 30 years ago, and they're still calling you going, hey, coach, I just learned this today. Thanks for making it hard on me. That is how you win.
That's very well said about the winning, and I think a lot of cultures, team cultures, like even in summer basketball, and when Professor and we were in the same league, we always joked about the summer league championship banner because the adults are in the stands are, all about you got to win this game, and it's not about that. It's about giving these kids opportunities to play against different competition. Usually the professor or I and other coaches are the officials, which, yes, professor is a patched official. I not so much. And it takes away from the kids' experiences. But I think we've all done a really good job of our kids, and maybe our kids don't agree today. But hopefully, 10, 20 years from now, they look back and they were like, yeah, those coaches had my back, had my best interest in mind. And, because of that, I learned that lesson and not just playing for us, but playing for other coaches. I think all coaches teach different life lessons. So that was definitely well said, Professor. Wouldn't expect anything less.
Thank you, sir.
The final point on winning cultures, and the Wizards started to hint at them a little bit about, the importance of feeder programs. I remember talking to an older coach, not on this podcast, about, when I got into varsity coaching, about why their program was so successful. And the comment back was, well, it starts in third grade. Like, they're doing the stuff at third grade that, coincide and are exact. They're using the same terminology. They're doing the same defensive principles or offensive principles. And then when they get to the varsity levels, it's really about X's and O's and not spending time teaching a kid how to make a left-handed layup as a freshman. So any more thoughts on feeder programs?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I mean, third third grade level, it's kind of early.
Well, wait a second. Third grade level is when they start playing varsity for you, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, I would hope that, by the time the kids get into junior high, that they can, like I said before, shoot, pass, and dribble. And those are things that are basic fundamentals, and, teach them the basics of a zone defense, the basics of a man-to-man defense. But that's really it. Don't try and teach these elaborate presses. I've watched many travel team kids that are, 9 and 10 years old, and they're out there at the local tournament, and they're out there pressing kids who really have no business being on the court, can barely, dribble, and they're pressing them and building up these great big leads. Well, what are they really learning? They're not really learning anything. They're just learning that they got one kid that can make a right-handed layup and can run like the bejesus, and they got another kid who can shoot from the outside. And, they get a turnover, and those two kids have the ball. I mean, I've watched it, and, it's not really teaching other kids how to play the game.
Yeah, I coached at a Vermont school and then came to New Hampshire and met you guys. Well, I mean, I met the Mags well before that, but the school that I coached at in New Hampshire used to come with their middle school team against my Vermont team and just kick the crap out of us. Like the Wizard said, all these elaborate presses and, and we're just working on the same thing and we're trying to get better. And then at the varsity level, we would always beat that same team. And it's about a feeder program, like you said, Mags. Like, teach the kids so that they're ready to play varsity. Don't try to win at the middle school level just so that you can win. Teach them something. That's how winning cultures happen. And when I was at the Vermont school, I actually wrote a curriculum, a 7-page curriculum that I wanted my groups from the third grade on using so that they had all the words. They had what we were trying to do at the varsity level. And that made winning easy because when the kids showed up in the 9th grade, they knew how to pass, dribble, and shoot. And then I taught them how to play defense, and we win.
They probably didn't have all the words that you used at the third grade level. I think some of the words we use are probably inappropriate, but I'm sure your
I didn't necessarily write that into the curriculum. It wasn't necessarily move your ass. It was, slide defensively, that kind of stuff.
Well, understood and wouldn't expect anything different. I agree with what the Wizard was saying about the elementary level, even sometimes the middle school level. You go to these tournaments or even games, and I think tournaments at the younger levels put in restrictions of like no pressing until the fourth quarter, but then the fourth quarter comes around and you have like piranhas standing at half court with kids that still dribble with their head down because that's the level that they're at. And as we all just mentioned, like, it does not teach anything about the game of basketball other than that, okay, I've got better athletes than you. You got kids that still can't dribble, so we're just going to steal the ball and go in for layups or whatever. Or my favorite is, you have a kid that's the tallest kid in middle school, and they shoot until they score, but then they get up to the JV or varsity level and they realize, I don't get 4 shots every time down the floor. I might only get 1 or 2, so I probably should figure out how to make a layup or a bunny, whatever we want to call it. But the other thing is, I've seen feeder programs where they do just the opposite of what we're trying to do at our level, or what we tried to do for you two at your level was, you go to a game and they're playing a 1-2-2 zone, and Coach Pryor has never played a 1-2-2 zone, but that's what we're going to do at the middle school level because it's going to help us win, instead of putting kids in positions that are going to prepare them for the next level. So as good of feeder programs can be, I think that they could also be detrimental to the program if they just don't follow the same structure or culture that we're trying to teach. And there's just so much emphasis at the younger levels on how many games a coach wins, and I've heard coaches say, well, I went undefeated 3 years in a row as a 5-6. Well, congratulations, but what happened to those kids when they get to the next level? So sometimes I think we overlook that, and taking kids out for making a mistake. I know Wizard hinted on this earlier. If it's a constant revolving door at the scorer's table, those kids really aren't learning anything other than the fact of the fear of failure, instead of teaching them in the moment and letting them learn from that. So I think we as coaches really did a good job of not pulling kids out because they made one mistake. But I've seen that happen with other programs.
I think if you get enough parents that disagree with us listening to this podcast, they're going to actually say that that's our biggest fault. And I think that, I know this because I've listened to your complaints and my complaints, and we allow kids to make mistakes, especially in practices. When we're in a semifinal or a final and the kid makes the same mistake 3 times, they probably don't stay in the game. But I've also seen both of you coaches take a kid out after they've made the same mistake twice, and then a minute and a half later, they're back in. And I think that's something that young coaches should really learn. It's okay to take the kid out, but put them back in. Let them know that they're allowed to make that mistake.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think we all would say that we've had some pretty exceptional assistant coaches, and that's always been something that I've asked of my assistant coaches, who I've had some of the best over the years, where we see that mistake 2 or 3 times, and we do. I mean, you can't let the kid continue to fail at that without the opportunity to teach them. But at the same time, you can't take them out, as you just said, Professor, put them at the end of the bench and forget about them. So, we've always had a team expectation is that when you come out of the game, regardless of the reason you're coming out, maybe it's just a regular rotational sub, you grab your water bottle and you sit with the assistant coaches and talk about things. But then, you go back in and like you said, I think we've all put the kids back in and, let them try to learn from that. So, well, we're almost at 30 minutes, so we'll just talk about team culture a little bit. And I think we hit on a lot of the factors that are important to teams. And, we talked about fundamentals, and I'll just jump to the part where we've already hinted at a little bit. It was, how does being part of a team transfer into life after sports? And I would just, I'll start with 2 things of communication and time management. To be on a team, kids have to be able to interact, develop social skills, and, playing a sport, or in a lot of our kids' cases, playing 3 sports, year round and doing school, really teaches them how to manage their time as wisely as they can. So I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. You have the kids who are able to function in school, in high school, and be excel at being students. Never really had students, athletes who couldn't play because of bad grades. I never really experienced that. Very few, at times we discussed, how you're responsible for being available to play. And if you're not available to play because of bad grades, then you're letting your teammates down. You're letting the team down. So I never really had to experience that. I would say probably now one of the biggest things that coaches probably deal with as far as kids being available and the information age has turned our kids into basically walking around with computers in their pockets all day long. And whatever problem comes of that computer that's in their pocket could probably be affecting teams down the road. Again, it's all a question of the administration and disciplinary aspect of that. I don't envy coaches these days because of that, and I don't envy coaches these days because of the COVID era. But as far as just the availability of being a good student and getting your work done and being on time, I think are all stuff that apply to their futures.
I had a player that played for me a long time ago that came over and applied for a position, and the person that they were applying to was at that point a parent of one of my current players, and the player, of course, was on time, and the manager asked, what's important to you? And she said, oh, I had a coach that said 15 minutes early is on time. You need to be here. You need to be respectful. And that's like really important to me. And the mom of a current player said, boy, that sounds like the same asshole that we have as a coach now. And it was. And so when you can pass on something that happens to apply to later on in their life, be on time, be respectful, work hard, don't have excuses. I mean, those are all the things that the three of us just truly believe in. That's more important than winning a championship. It's really about what you're going to do later on in your life. And I think you two do an amazing job at preparing kids for later in their life.
Well, right back.
This ass section.
Right back at you.
That's the new segment that we're talking about, is how much can we kiss each other's ass?
Oh, well.
I can't bend down that low.
Yeah, I think Wizard said it earlier in the podcast that, life is a competition. Life is competitive. Things that we probably instill in kids is, you're not always going to get the first job that you want. You're not always going to have a great boss. Like, we talk about us being assholes. Like, sometimes we are assholes, and the kids, think that, we hate them or whatever. And it's like, sometimes, you got to get your point across. But if I've always said to kids, if I'm not trying to make you better and make you uncomfortable, every day at getting you out of your comfort zone, then either I really don't like you as a player or I don't think you have potential. So, in life, it's the same thing. When you go into I love it when people call life after high school the real world, like they lived in a fake world for 18 years. You apply for a job and there's 10 candidates, and what makes you stand out? And what you just said, Professor, of teaching kids to be early, we have the same 15-minute rule, and we expect the upperclassmen to lead by example, year in or day in and day out, I should say. But I think the other thing is the parents that influence or attempt to influence administrations because they don't feel that their coach is doing what's best for little Susie, as opposed to probably back in our day where our parents said, well, work harder if you want more playing time. Or I like to use the phrase when a kid comes to me in December saying, what can I do differently, coach, to get on the court more? And one of my favorite questions to ask is, well, what did you do in the off season? If you didn't do anything and other kids did things, it's a miracle that those kids that actually played in the off season seem to figure out how to get better. And you didn't. And we talked about entitlement a little bit last time. And one of the things that I wish I had mentioned was, seniors, like, we don't get things in life because of how old we are. Maybe the only thing we get is more sarcastic and
AARP benefits.
AARP benefits, yep.
Gray hair.
No hair.
I think
no hair.
I think gray hair comes from just coaching. But I think that, when we expect our kids to go out into the real world, you know, you're not always going to be the most experienced person. You're not going to be the oldest person. And sometimes I see seniors either deciding not to play after they played for 3 years, or playing with the expectation that, I got to play this year because I'm a senior. Nothing happens because of how old we are, other than retirement, like you two.
Yeah.
Yep.
My quick comment on that, and one of the other favorite quotes of, like, as you coach forever, is like, summer league is optional, shooting on your own is optional, showing up in preseason is optional, and so is playing time.
It does work out that way.
Yes, it does.
I think. Go ahead. Sorry, Professor.
Well, we're getting to our time limit. So because I wanted to introduce our next segment. You said that I could introduce something.
I sure did.
So our next segment is the GOAT segment. And everybody loves this. You got to debate the greatest of all times. And we're going to pick a different topic. And of our 33 downloads, you guys are more than welcome to chime in with what you want to hear, or definitely at the end of this debate today, say, oh, come on, you guys are freaking crazy. That's no way. And I know we're going to get the new school people always arguing we're not going to do is LeBron greater than than Michael right now, because it's only going to be anybody new. But our debate today is going to be the greatest point guard NBA player of all time. And I think we ought to let the Wizard chime in here, because I think he's the oldest, at least in spirit.
Well, now remember, just because I am older by a few months than you, I have to confess, at a point in my life now, I don't watch a lot of NBA basketball.
Well, it's not basketball. It's like the WWE.
I have a reason. Back in 1982, I can remember watching the NCAA championship with my mother, who has passed on now, but I was 13 years old, 12 years old at the time. Christ, I don't even remember how old I was. But anyways.
That comes with age.
Yeah.
She watched that game with me, and the reason I watched that game wasn't because of Michael Jordan. It was because I loved James Worthy and loved to watch him play. And through the years, I kept up with their careers. I wasn't really a Celtics fan or anything like that, but I listened to the players whose names came up. And I got to say, I loved watching John Stockton play. I loved watching Steve Nash play. Jason Kidd, loved to watch him play too. Don't really remember Oscar Robertson, but I through the years I can remember those players as point guards, but I remember John Stockton. So I'm gonna throw my laurels around John Stockton and say I feel that he's probably one of the best point guards, only because I really haven't watched the guys most recent. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, he reminds me of that little monster that you had play for you. She came down the court, played great defense, made great passes, shot when she had to. I think about, you're going to have to help me with her name, or maybe we're not going to say players' names here, but she never really got all the credit of your couple of superstars. And I remember watching Mags' teams too. He had this little point guard back, 15 years ago. She didn't do anything other than everything she was supposed to do to make the team better. And John Stockton's a great pick. Go ahead, Mags. What you got?
Yeah, no, I think, the evolution of pro sports now, and particularly basketball, it's a positionless sport now. When you have, James Harden bringing the ball up, and I know we're not going to debate about anybody that is playing today, but the definition of a true point guard, to me is somebody that's a floor general, a leader, makes the best decisions, doesn't necessarily score all the points, but has the ball in their hands a lot because they're trusted. And usually speaking, a good point guard makes players around them better. And I think we've all had those kids, that you just said, Professor, do their job. And the team is better, because of that. And they buy into that role. I put some names down, like, Magic Johnson was considered a point guard, and I think he was, one of the transformational pieces for the Lakers dynasty, but obviously had a lot of talent around him to win 5 championships. I too, Wizard, did not see Oscar Robertson play. But I'm torn between Magic and John Stockton, and the one thing I would say is without John Stockton and Karl Malone, the Utah Jazz were probably never a relevant franchise in the 90s. But that's the duo that defined the pick and roll, the pick and roll, the pick and roll.
Right.
So, you look at, stats, when I look at a player's stats today, like they might have a game where they score 8 points and they average 15 or whatever, but they had 6 assists. So, they contributed on at least 12 other points. And that's, to me, like, when you look at a point guard, shouldn't be necessarily the one scoring 25 a game and, dishing out 5 assists. They maybe should be scoring 15 a game and assisting on 10 baskets per game or whatever, to have more of an influence on the team. So I think I'll agree with John Stockton.
All right, and I get to wrap that up. I'm going to go with the idea of who would I want if I was starting a team today, and I'm going to take the guy that I think that has ruined the game for us as coaches. I think, without a doubt, if I have a first pick for a point guard, I'm taking Steph Curry. I know that you're supposed to pass the ball. He does it. He has made players that would be non-NBA starters into some of the best players that have played. Draymond Green is awful, and yet Steph Curry makes the guy into an all-star player. So I'm going to go against you guys, even though John Stockton's probably the best true point guard. I'm drafting Steph Curry first.
Yeah, and he definitely changed the game because, back in the good old days, one of the first teams that I was fortunate enough to coach to a championship, I've shared this story hundreds of times. We shot 23 point attempts the whole season. And today it's not normal if you shoot 20, less than 20 3-point attempts in a game. So he's one of the reasons for that. But, the 3-point shot has definitely changed the game of basketball.
Absolutely.
Well, then we can't wait to hear what other people have to think about this debate. I'm surprised, especially with the Wizards' advanced age, no one mentioned Bob Cousy, but he is the point guard with the most championships. So
he is, and I would say, he also had some pretty good players around him that dominated at their positions. But yes, he is the winningest point guard, official point guard of all time when it comes to championships. Well, as we conclude episode 2, we do encourage you to put your comments to our GOAT debate in the podcast comment section. And we look forward to hopefully continuing this with another episode next week and topics to be determined as we get through the week. So thank you to the two co-hosts again for joining me this morning, even though we got a little late start. And
thanks, Mac. Thanks, Wizard.
Yep, we'll fix that.
We are going to fix it, and I'll dumb it down. I'll make sure that we get the technology links correct. There will be no emails. We won't throw this podcast any more off the tracks than we normally do.
Hey, if there's any IT people in the 3rd grade up in the Canadian border, we got a job for you to help out with the Wizard in the morning.
Yeah. He probably pays well. I just don't think you're allowed to go onto his property, so you're going to have to do it remotely. Signing off for this week's episode of Coaches and Coffee. Tune in next week as we return to the norm. Until next week.